Hello! Today is part 3 of working on this X-Wing Starfighter. Last time we got the base coat done for a lot of these parts, or at least the base coat done for the parts that will need to be masked. Since then, I also finished cleaning up this base of the arm of the base, and now the back is actually properly filled for the most part. Looks like it actually still underwent some shrinkage since I sanded it this morning. You can tell right here from the way the shadow casts, but oh well. I have to settle for it not being perfect. Hi Azu, how are you doing today? Okay. I've also noticed that now that the actual base of the base has dried, the silver that we use isn't a very bright silver. It's a very soft, diffuse silver, which, for better or worse, is kind of nice in its own way. It's just not the really high reflective chromey sort of effect I might have expected. That works. Probably don't want it to be too bright. What's kind of neat is if we compare the silver on different surfaces. And one reason why it didn't come out very super shiny is because this was sprayed onto the primer directly. So this was probably, what was it, 1000 grit? Yes, 1000 grit primer. This stuff, that's good. It's good that you're doing that, right? So it's not the smoothest surface that it could have been. This part, on the other hand, is exactly the same silver, but is a bit shinier. And that's probably because I've sprayed black on this area first before spraying the silver. And the black paint that I sprayed has a higher grit than the primer. It's smoother than the primer, so the silver going on top of it also ends up being smoother. And that's probably why it feels shinier for this part than it does on the base. So just something to keep in mind in the future if I want to get different results, that I might need to spray it with some black paint or some other paint first to get it to a higher smoothness before spraying the metallic. Let's see. Anyway, so these are all the parts. My main plan today is to do a bunch of masking and spray another layer of base paint on a lot of these. But before we do that, there are a few pieces that I want to touch up, and they can then dry while I work on the main set of pieces. So one of the pieces I want to touch up is this one, and the reason for that is that some areas have a different amount of smoothness to it. So the reflectivity of those parts is a bit off from everything else. So I'm going to sand it down and coat it again in silver. And then there's also this part, which let's see, if we look right here, it's pretty rough because I messed up when I deepened the seam lines here, or the panel lines. I did not clean this up enough after redoing the panel lines, so surface looks really rough, so I need to sand that a bit and redo the paint there. So we're going to start off by redoing the sanding on some of these parts. I'm going to move this out of the way. This piece is the one we'll start with. This one's already pretty close to where we want. I think we can probably get away with something like 5000 grit to finish the part. So I got a few pieces of sandpaper ahead of time. I believe this is 1000, 3000, 5000, and 7000, so this is 5000. I might have to go and buff it with the 7000, but 5000 should be enough. I'm also going to switch out this glove. This glove is a little bit too loose. I think I had some gloves with the wrong size mixed in my box of gloves. The extra folds from the glove being too big keep on getting in there. The extra folds from the glove being too big keep on getting in the way. Need a nice tight fit so it doesn't do that. Okay, here we go. Also, I realized something a day or two ago. These gloves are pretty noisy, aren't they? Okay, so I'm actually going to start with 3000 to get rid of the biggest imperfections, and then go at it with 5000 afterwards. The main thing is that there are actually a lot of details on this surface that I am afraid of getting rid of, so I don't want to just go and sand across the entire surface in order to deal with those little imperfections. So I'm going to fold this sandpaper and go at it at an angle. Folding it gives it a little bit more structure. Usually it would be best to use some sort of sanding stick in order to make sure that I'm sanding in the plane, but I don't really have one that fits that sort of space. And since I'm not moving too much material, hopefully it doesn't distort too much. I wonder if this is a good distance. Yeah. Okay, I think that's decent with the 2000. So let's jump up to 5000. Oh, I guess I'm missing a 3000 somewhere. Oh well. Okay, I think that's good there. And then I have this, which I think I just need to go around the entire circumference and smooth it out. Is today a sleepy day, Azu? Be right, and check something. Okay. Now 5,000. Hello. Thought you were out today. Didn't expect you to show up. I'm not sure if you could have heard me last time. Can you hear me now? Last time you said you were too busy to hear, or to have audio. That's something I want to try. I was actually talking to Azu about it earlier today. So, I wanted to ask you, do you prefer Rye or Manning, since you're not Rye here? I was actually telling Azu that since I'm studying some machine learning, I think it would be fun if I ever learn enough to try to make my own text to speech or speech to text as a sort of learning project, I suppose. Okay, so as I rotate this around, you can see the light reflect off of it. Using something like a 5,000 grit sandpaper is so shiny. Okay, I'll call you Rye. Okay. So, you missed it. But I'm just saying, I was just telling chat that I am touching up some of these pieces that I noticed had some imperfections and needed a bit of sanding before I continued with painting. Okay. I think that is good. So, let's think a little bit about the order of operations here. I primarily want to do 2 colors today to start off. There are already machine learning based packages already written to do that. Of course there are. The reason why I want to take it into my own hands is that I want to make it better for me. So what I would probably do is I would take a pre-trained network and add my own speech data as additional training data. At least in theory, that's probably something I might be able to do. And that would make the neural network for speech-to-text recognition more adapted for my own speech. And that's because a lot of times neural networks are built to be the most generalized and probably wouldn't suit very specific things. But if I were to train it using my voice data, then it might be particularly suited for the way I talk, the way I speak. Anyway, so I definitely need to change this piece to silver today. So at some point I need to do silver. I also need to do silver for this piece again. Both of these need primers. This one also needs primer for these parts that I just sanded, but instead of turning it silver, I need white paint on those. After doing the white paint on those, I also need to spray silver for these thruster engines. And for these parts, I need to mask the rest of the part before I do that. So, if I need to mask this part, that means this part needs to be painted before I do anything else. So the first thing I will probably do is prime and white paint on this before moving on to doing any silvers. And if I do silver, I might as well do silver at the same time for these thruster engines, as well as the arm and connection part for the base. The thing that is a little bit confusing with the planning here is that there are other parts that also need white. This part needs white because the only part that should be gold is the mechanical parts here. The other parts out here, or the other regions out here, should be white. So this needs to be masked first before I paint it white. So what will probably happen is I will do the white on this part first and set it aside to dry. Do the priming and silver on these. Set those aside to dry, and those will not need to be touched again after the silver is done on those, because that's the extent of the painting on those parts. It's just the base. It doesn't need anything else fancy done to it. But then while this part is drying, I'm going to start masking parts like this one that have some metallic, but the rest need to be painted another color. So this part will be masked, this part will be masked, but then there are also a few other parts that need to be masked. That would be the 4 sets of thruster parts. So the tail end of the thruster needs to be masked, and the front end of the thruster engine unit also needs to be masked. And that's going to be done with a combination of silly putty and masking tape. So that's going to be amusing to see. Okay, so let's move these things aside. The first thing that we're going to need to do is do priming again. Okay, so they're just these 3 pieces that need primer. Okay, let us switch to airbrushing view now. Oh yeah, silly putty. Let me show you this before I can't speak it. So it's funny because I bought a bunch of silly putty, and it is actually silly putty. See right here it says silly putty. It came in these really weird egg-shaped containers, and there's a lot of silly putty in one of these. I'm probably not even going to use the silly putty inside this egg because this is fresh silly putty. I'm just going to reuse the silly putty. That's the orange stuff, because that has already been used on it for a little bit of painting, and we can keep on using it until too much paint has been gobbled up by the silly putty. That blue stuff is blue tack. We're not using blue tack. Blue tack is similar. It can probably perform a similar job, but it has a higher tendency to break up, so we don't use blue tack for that. Blue tack is mostly used for holding parts rather than covering parts. Another strategy that could be employed is masking paint or masking fluid, which is usually some sort of PVA based liquid that basically is like applying a layer of glue like material over the paint that you want to cover, and then you just pull it off as one big piece when you're done. But putty, I haven't found a liquid masking fluid that I like yet, so that's not what we're going to be using today. Okay, switching. Having worked with paraffin in a lab setting, I'd say paraffin is probably not very good. It does not have enough surface adhesion to really ensure a good seal over mainly irregular surfaces. That's the big concern, irregular surfaces. Paraffin is pretty good about attaching to very regular surfaces, like the smooth lip of a test tube or something, or a beaker. But the thing about that is that for the most part, that lip is all within a single plane, so it's pretty easy to pull it taut and create a seal over it. But if it's irregular, then it gets a little funky with the paraffin because it needs to twist in all sorts of ways. And at that point, if you're gonna deal with almost regulars or almost even surfaces, you might as well use masking tape. If you're dealing with irregular surfaces, should probably use something like putty or masking fluid. Masking fluid's probably the best, but it takes a little bit more time to deal with because it needs to dry before it can be painted over. I actually do have a bottle of masking fluid. This stuff, it's really thick blue liquid. It basically creates this sort of gummy layer that can be pulled off after you're done, or you could try to soften it up with water because it still is somewhat water soluble after drying. Okay, I'm still setting up for the airbrushing. you might not have been here for it yesterday, but I changed some audio settings to make it so that I can record some airbrushing sounds. Tell me what you think about it. Okay. That painting part is done for now. Now it's time for the masking. So, in addition to using putty, we'll be using some masking tape as well. Let me get that. Alright, we'll also be using this, ooh, it looks kind of dirty. Let me wipe this down real fast. This is my glass cutting mat. We don't want to have a lot of particles on the surface because those particles might get stuck in the masking tape and make it less effective. Yeah. What did you think of the airbrushing sounds? The difference between... So, let me explain what's going on. So, when I am recording like I am right now, I am using my webcam mic with a noise gate and a noise filter. The noise gate just decides a minimum volume for sounds to be permitted. So if a sound is too quiet, like basically say the sound of wind is too quiet, then the mic won't pick it up. The noise filter, on the other hand, will determine whether or not the noise that is picked up sounds like noise or something it should be picking up. So something that is like the rustle of leaves, for instance, would be treated as noise and be filtered out. But when I'm airbrushing, instead of using filters, I just have the overall volume really low, and that's because a lot of the sounds that happen during airbrushing would probably be interpreted as noise. And because it's just a lot of continuous noise, if OBS doesn't remove it all in its entirety, then it ends up being this weird, garbled, distorted mess of sound. So we're better off just having no filter in order to capture the sound, but in exchange, it's extremely noisy. So the overall volume is turned down really, really low. And even though the fan is actually louder than the airbrushing in the way I'm experiencing the sound here in my workspace, because the airbrush is closer to the mic, it picks up the airbrushing sound as being a bit louder. And that's essentially how I'm trying to capture it. Just hoping that it's louder than the fan, and then making the fan quiet enough that it's tolerable or can be ignored when there's BGM. Anyway, here's the masking tape. Where's my putty? Here's the putty. I wonder if I should lower the whole thing like this. Yeah, this is about the distance we're working at. So what I'm going to do is pull some masking tape out and lay it on the surface here. But this is 10mm masking tape. That's not the only masking tape I want to use. There's also 6mm masking tape for some somewhat smaller areas. And this is 1mm masking tape, super tiny. You'll need some tweezers to handle the masking tape. As well as a knife to cut the masking tape. And it might be useful to use the knife to cut the putty as well. So, let's see. I'm going to start with this part. What I want to do is cover all of this mechanical looking stuff in the middle, and the problem with this part is that it's kind of raised. So my hope is to fill in a lot of the gaps using the putty, and then adhere the tape to the flat surface on the sides bordering the mechanical parts to seal it in overall. Yeah. Also going to need something like a toothpick to apply the putty, and I don't want to apply it with the knife because the knife will probably cut the paint and the plastic if I'm not careful, but a toothpick is much softer, so it won't really damage that very much if I make a mistake. Oh, let me turn off my airbrush. Actually, now that I look at it more carefully, I probably don't even want to use masking tape for the edges here. And just depend 100% on the putty, because those edges I think should also be white. My dad gave me something very amusing. Last night, while I was talking about working on model kits, he went and dug up some old model kits, some Tamiya car models that he had started a very, very long time ago, or at least one of them he started, and then the other is completely untouched, but it's funny because I didn't expect to just have these extremely old kits lying around. Probably at least 20, maybe even 30 years old at this point. Okay, so I'm going to use the putty to stuff up the hole here because that will easily fill it up and also give a little bit more surface, I think, for the masking tape. But actually, most of this part will just depend on the tape extending really far past the exhaust of this thruster. Also, I just realized today is really, really cold where I am. It's actually about 48 degrees Fahrenheit. That's probably too white. About this much tape should be enough. So I am actually freezing right now. Okay, that's not quite enough. So I'll need to cut another piece, or take that piece that I just cut. So because I have acquired unexpectedly 2 model car kits, I might be building a car at some point. Which is a very different challenge from building a Bandai kit, because something like a Tamiya car kit, especially one that's so old, involves a lot of glue for one part, whereas Bandai kits are like 100% snap fit, which is an amazing feat of engineering when you consider how many kits require glue. That's why I feel if I had to recommend people a kit to start off with when trying to get into modeling, definitely Bandai kits. They're so easy to put together. I wasn't filling the inside at all, but then it's probably not necessary. I guess I'll do it on this one because I just remembered. It won't make a difference. Masking tape extends so far out after all. Oh. This piece is too big, so now it's easily falling out. Okay, there we go. One thing that I didn't learn until being in the hobby for quite a while is that masking tape made for modeling is very different from masking tape made for painting. Like, the masking tape made for, say, painting your house is a lot thicker and stiffer and stickier than modeler's masking tape, which actually just makes it not very good for most modeling needs. Okay, so this part is probably going to be all putty. I want half of this. It's too stiff, so it fails to conform to a lot of shapes. It's too thick, so it risks leaving a very apparent edge, so it's not subtle. It doesn't create subtle results, and it's too sticky. So if you do a weak paint job, which hopefully you don't, that sort of tape has a higher chance of tearing your paint off when you remove it. Is that too much? Okay, let me just squish it all the way down and make sure it really reaches in, and then pull it back to expose the edge that I want painted. That's probably too much. Okay, let's squish it in, then take away excess material. Oops. That might lead to the question of what is a weak paint job? Well, if you don't spray a proper layer of paint, then it won't cure in a way that really adheres to the surface. For one part, I think that paint depends on both adhesion and cohesion to properly form on a surface. So if you spray a layer that's too thin, there won't be cohesion because there's not enough paint to stick to other paint. Even if you have primer, sometimes I find that the paint to primer adhesion is not the best until you have a nice layer of paint, because then the paint will attach to paint in addition to attaching to the primer layer. So both cohesion and adhesion, and that forms a nice solid layer. The other problem is a matter of choosing the right thinner and spraying distance, because if you have the wrong sort of thinner, the paint might dry mid-air, and what you have landing on the surface of your model is dried paint, and dried paint doesn't adhere well because the adhesion happens when it's wet, because it partially dissolves into the primer layer and attaches to it. So if you spray too far away or use a thinner that dries out mid-flight, then it's not going to turn out good. Okay. Let's fill in the whole of this engine and then try covering it up. The question here is, what's the next color I paint? Because this part will have 3 main airbrush colors. The silver that's already there. This textured area on top is going to be gold, and then the rest is white. So I think I try to mask this and paint the gold next on this part, which makes this one of the trickiest areas to mask. It's not a simple cylinder, it's like 2 half cylinders and one that's very shallow, so it doesn't have a lot of surface for masking tape to attach to. Don't want this. I'm taking this to use. Okay, I think I cut this a little bit long. Yeah. Also, give me one. I'm going to close the window. Okay. As long as I'm not painting, I might as well keep the windows closed and warm up the room a little bit. It is way too cold. I don't even know if I want to paint that long today, just because I am really, really cold. But let's at least get through a few rounds before I throw in the towel and become a ball of blankets. Okay, I need to shorten this a little bit. Also, let me lower the table. Here we go. Oh. Still a little bit long. What's the length this needs to be? I might need to use this as a template and cut a few pieces the same length first before I commit to adhering this piece. Yeah, this is about how far I want it to go. Right, did you ever find that model kit you mentioned to me? I'm still really curious. Oh, sorry about that. No, not yet. Oh, so it's not like even where you live, it's probably out somewhere in the city? Oh, this piece is not quite long enough. Okay, must redo, or I'll just put it on a different piece. Let's clean up here a little bit. Get rid of some of this tape. Just gonna go and pile in the corner. Now for some more 6mm. You burned your tongue, Azu? On what, coffee? Okay, let's stuff up this space with a bit more putty. Okay, I think this is good. Wait, what's satisfying about it? Do you just like the way it looks when I tear it? That's kind of funny. I never thought that putty ripping would be satisfying. But that does remind me of a funny thing that I learned of a few years back. Apparently, there are people that just do slime videos like there's designer slime, like some super viscous things, like basically putty filled with like glitter and little bits of things, or interesting colors, and it would make videos of tearing and mixing and just playing with the slime. Like, that's a thing apparently. I thought you were out right now. What are you actually doing to be able to just stop and watch? Not that I'm complaining, but I'm just curious. Thought you were actually doing something. Oh. So, one thing that's kind of amusing, or one thing that I learned, is that sometimes what I want to do when masking is to use very small pieces along the edge and then bigger pieces for the rest of the surface, because the smaller pieces can focus on being adhered just to that edge, while the bigger pieces sometimes lose grip along weird edges because they're trying to, say, conform to the rest of the shape, or perhaps just because they're so large, the rest of the piece of masking tape is susceptible to getting pushed and pulled around. Cleaning putty. One thing that I find kind of interesting about putty is that it flows really, really slowly, but you can tell that it flows because immediately after working the putty, it's not glossy, but if I leave it alone for a while, it becomes glossy, so it's kind of smoothing out over time through surface tension. Like this piece that I did earlier, it looks kind of shiny now. Making sure the edge is really sealed. This one's also kind of shiny. There are some places where it looks like it's going to be a little bit exposed, but I'm gonna not worry too much about that and touch it up later using hand brushing. Okay, I need more putty. Turns out my store of used putty will not be enough, so we get to tap into the new putty. I think there's a lot of science that goes into everything, really, on some level, especially when making things. I feel like having some understanding of the science behind why certain techniques work or how certain materials and substances interact is useful. Like how one of the biggest things when painting model kits to take advantage of is the solubility of different paints. Like, you always try to paint lacquer layers on the bottom because they are the most insoluble. You can't really dissolve them in a lot of other solvents other than the strongest or hottest solvents, as some people like calling it. And then you would layer enamels and acrylics on top of that because those are more soluble than the lacquer paints. And another neat thing is that usually you don't use enamel paints directly on plastic because they make the plastic brittle, but if you put a layer of lacquer paint on first, then it protects and seals the plastic because the enamel paint can't penetrate the lacquer layer in order to weaken the plastic. So there's a bit of chemistry there. Things like putty and blue tack are really fun, and I really love those kind of materials because they're what you would call non-Newtonian fluids. More specifically, both of them I think are what you consider strain hardening fluids, which is funny because while they both are strain hardening, they're strain hardening in slightly different ways, which I can't really explain in a simple manner, but I can explain the strain hardening part. So when you apply strain, that's like applying some sort of force to the fluid that causes it to flow. So like if I'm pulling on it, it's flowing, and stretching. The stretching is the flowing. But if I pull really fast, it gets harder to pull the faster I pull on it. And you can tell because at some point, if I pull really hard, it actually breaks. It completely refuses to flow, and it would rather just break instead of flowing. So this is how this putty is a strain hardening fluid. Thinking about it though, even though putty is a strain hardening fluid, that's not why we want to use it as a mask. The reason why we use putty as a mask is because there's a certain minimum amount of shear or strain that needs to be applied. Wait, am I saying strain hardening? Is shear thickening is actually the phrase, I think. Although it's, I guess conceptually that's kind of similar. Anyway, what's important is that the putty doesn't flow until a minimum amount of force is applied, which means that you can shape it, stick it somewhere, and then it will more or less stay where you want it. Yes, Azu, shear thickening. Now that the windows are closed, I am experiencing less death by freezing. Yesterday, I showed my mom my YouTube channel and how to watch it, and she laughed at me when she saw that I dropped a part on stream. Uh, okay. So I think I have this piece to go, and then the windshield. After that, we can go back to the first part that we were working on today, the wing, one of the wings. Should stop being lazy and just go for the knife every time to lift the masking tape. Using the tweezers to attempt to lift the masking tape just messes up the edges. Also, speaking of messed up, this one is a little bit too long. What is all that? They just... What? Thought they were all the same. What? Glue in some other gelatinous material. That's suddenly reminding me of a chemistry experiment I did back in elementary school. What was it? What was the chemical? It's white glue and something to polymerize the glue to make it into a putty. I don't remember what that is, but what was kind of funny was that the result was called oobleck. I think if you look up oobleck on the internet, you would probably find the answer to the other compound, but it was just some sort of powder. What was it called? Oops. Need to keep it in view. Okay, let's see if this piece is long enough. Hopefully it is. Otherwise I would need to pull a little bit more tape out. That's good. Are you guys watching anything interesting these days? Any anime or TV? You can talk about it if you want. Okay, so all of those are done. Now this part, this windshield, can you see it? What I want to do is I want to leave the actual windshield part black, so like this area stays black, and then paint the frame of the windshield white. Since these are perfectly flat surfaces, what would be best is the masking tape, because if I went with putty, it would just kind of slide right off. Spy X Family, I've watched 2 episodes so far. It looks fun. It's been fun so far. I think it might be the series I am enjoying the most so far this season. Since I'm using masking tape, there's probably 2 strategies I can use to do this. One is to cut the masking tape to shape and then fill it in. The other is to put a piece of masking tape over the entire surface and then cut along the edge and then peel away all the excess. The main problem with the second strategy is that these surfaces that I want to cover are so small that the masking tape won't really adhere strong enough for the cutting process, so it might slide while I'm cutting it. So I'm going to have to try to cut the masking tape on the side on this cutting mat and then slap it on. Oh, so you've read the manga? Heard good things about the manga as well. Comes to no surprise. The Shonen Jump title that got an anime with a big studio like Wit? It is Wit, right? Okay. Considering how wide these parts are, I have to choose between 10mm and 6mm. I might go 6mm. 6 just because that's just barely wide enough, even though 10mm might give me more room to work with when cutting. Some of these parts look like they're as small as 1mm. So I'm gonna leave that piece of tape there because I might take advantage of it and call out a bit. That's a lot, but I think through trial and error I'm gonna end up wasting a bit of tape anyway. Okay. How do I want to do this? Just gonna put it on and then use a toothpick to try to get it to match up with the contours. This big surface is probably the easiest surface to do first. Okay, that slip scared me a little bit because it looked like it knocked off a little bit of the paint, but did not. That's why I'm using a toothpick, because the toothpick is soft enough that as long as the paint job is solid, it shouldn't be able to break the paint easily. Okay. Maybe I'll use this felt tip marker to give me a guide as to where to cut. It feels a little bit thick. Maybe it would have been better to do it with a pencil instead of that marker. Cutting the corners off because the corners are rounded. Really eyeballing the corners though, because I think they were too small to really be captured by the toothpick and marker process. There's a certain amount of tolerance to this because the edges will be panel lined, so they will be filled in with a bit of black paint no matter what. and that means that they don't have to be perfectly covered. They just have to be covered up to that edge, and as long as that edge has a proper seal and it doesn't go beyond it, the right things will be the right color. Okay, so there's 1 of 5 window panes. This is probably the hardest part of the masking today. Let me actually lower. Should I lower it? No, instead I'll just change the zoom, because I think the focus is a little off for this part. I want to buy an add-on to OBS that would allow me to use my keyboard to control my camera settings, because I don't like needing to click and open the camera properties every time I want to change something. But for the time being, this is what we're going to work with. Oh, that's actually a little short. Interesting. Guess I'll be doing one of the small windows first. Yeah, this is so small. It doesn't feel like the details are coming through. Okay, they might be barely coming through. Let me grab a pencil. I only have pens next to me. I just wish that I could have a setting where the camera focuses on the center of the scene and not try to achieve some sort of overall focus, because all I really care is the center. If it just autofocused on the center every time that something changes, I think I'd be pretty happy with that. This part is so short that I'm not even going to use the ruler for this cut. I'm just going to depend on the straight edge of the blade. The amount of material lost is kind of sad here. I feel like for this extremely tiny triangle, I am wasting more tape than I am using. One strategy that's kind of neat that I've seen with some model kits is that instead of spending the time cutting your own masking tape, what people do is they would just use the stickers that come with the model kit and use that as masking. I tried that once, it didn't work for me. It works for some people apparently, it did not work for me. I trust my masking tape more than the stickers that come with the kit, because this is the masking tape's job. the stickers that come with the kit were not made to be used as masking tape. Okay, that's 2 out of 5 so far. Next section is one of these long windows. So I'm gonna cut a long piece out for that. I'm also going to try to match this long piece to one of the edges that way when this cut needs to be made. One thing that's also a little difficult here is understanding the focal plane that I'm trying to record at. So right now the focal plane, based on the focal distance of this camera setting, is actually slightly below, or it's actually this surface itself. I tried to focus the camera based on looking at the ruler on the cutting mat, and that's a little bit frustrating because if I handle anything other than things on the cutting mat, they're actually slightly out of focus. But I can't be bothered to change the camera's focus every time I switch between the cutting mat and stuff above the cutting mat. So I'm just trying to hold things as low as possible while also yeah, just trying to hold things as low as possible to keep it close to that focal plane. Is this... Oh, that's a little awkward. It feels like it's a little long. One thing I find kind of amusing is how... Oh, that's not amusing. This is definitely not amusing. My knife is not cutting. There we go. There's this one band of light at the bottom of the cutting mat, and if something is on the surface, it looks like it's just floating on the light. There's a little bit of extra tape stuck to the back of this piece. Different lenses, that's an interesting thought. Something with a wider depth of focus, maybe. I have but one webcam right now. Actually, technically I have two, but the other one's really old and no good for filming anything at all. Okay, so this slice of pizza is a little bit long. It's kind of funny because you would think that are just 2 straight lines. I guess it really is just 2 straight lines, but maybe the end is not cut quite correctly. Okay. 3 out of 5. I might have cut a little bit too much of the end of that off. I'll add a very narrow triangle to try to cover up a little bit of that. triangle apparently was not narrow enough, which is pretty funny because I think it's a pretty narrow triangle. I think for the foreseeable future, every stream is a sort of work in progress stream, trying to improve stream, although I think that's probably best as a general attitude. Also, I'm bumping into the camera, aren't I? It's really close. Okay. That extends all the way now, the way I want it to. I'm gonna press it in. Okay. Now for the other side. Oh no, I have a runny nose, excuse me. I'm gonna blow my nose. Where's that mute button? You know, I find that the focal plane for this, oh, okay, CRI. The focal plane for this camera is surprisingly narrow. It feels like working with a microscope. What is this? Why am I bumping into it? Is it my headphones? Because I don't feel my face bumping into it. I'm really hungry for some reason suddenly. Maybe there needs to be a snack break. But no, we must keep on working. Crap. Very hungry. Sad. Oh no. Maybe I shouldn't have cut that corner. Yeah, I should not have cut that corner. Let me actually just vaguely cheat and just try to copy this on a different piece of tape. Oh no, it didn't cut through. Doesn't quite go all the way down. Okay, that's most of the masking. Let me go grab the other wing piece that we painted today and tweak it a little bit. So, one thing that I noticed today, right after painting it, is that it was a little dusty. And because I had just painted it, I couldn't mess with it, but now that it's been drying all day, I can try to mess with it a little bit. What I'm going to try to do is try to buff it out using a paper towel and water. Basically, a paper towel is like really high grit sandpaper, but for the most part it wouldn't be able to affect a proper paint job because it's not actually an abrasive. But if there's dust that's loosely attached to the surface, it sometimes can knock the dust off. one of the problems that I didn't really air out my room properly before I started airbrushing today. Usually it seems to be a good practice to open the windows and turn on my fan for like 10 or 20 minutes before I start airbrushing. And that way it gets rid of some of the dust that's already in the air. The other thing that's nice to do is to spray some water into the air. What that will do is that if the water attaches to any dust in the air, it'll weigh the dust down and it'll sink to the floor. Okay. Oh. It's about it's a little better looking. I think I got some of the dust off. I'm not going to worry too much about it. Okay, so there are 2 more pieces that need to be masked. These 2 wings. Mainly it's to mask the areas surrounding the thrusters. Right now I'm just thinking a little bit about how I want to do it. I think the strategy is going to be a little bit cheaty. So if you look at the engine carefully, oh, I bumped into it again. If you look at the engine carefully, you'll notice that the edge doesn't perfectly create a straight line. It's not a straight line. It's actually a very rough edge. So I can't actually put a piece of masking tape that follows that edge, but I don't need to care. I'm just gonna leave most of that exposed and match the masking tape to this straight line here and color everything in between silver as well. And then most of that's going to be obscured by washes later, so I'm not too worried about covering it perfectly. So the question here now is, how do I achieve that? And also, how much of this area do I want covered? I think this area, I'm gonna try to cut some semicircular. There's some arcs so that this sort of wall is covered. Erase the focus a little bit. Crap. It's hard pulling this straight without pulling it off. This is just impossible because it's too short, maybe? Or do I need to rely more on pushing it into place? I like how I said just 2 more parts and we're done masking, but this is actually one of the toughest parts to mask. Where's my 1mm tape? Here it is. Okay, that's one side, now this side. Can you hear me crack my neck? You totally can. Ha. Oh, sorry. God. a little too close there. I should really go for a banana right now. But dinner is in about an hour. It's too close to dinner for a banana. How do I actually want to do this? It'll ruin my appetite for dinner, and I would need to stop to eat a banana. I don't think I have time. I need to... The goal today is to... Oh, this didn't work out like I imagined. The goal is to finish painting this before dinner. I think it'll take me another... It'll take me at least 10 to 20 minutes to finish masking this, because it's so complicated. Dying a little. And then I'm going to need time to spray paint, so I need to spray 4, 5, 6, about 7 or 8 things white, 2 parts silver, and then 1 part 4 parts gold. Yeah, I think I need to focus on this in order to make it in time. I skipped this earlier, but I think I should do this. Put a little piece of 1mm down on the inside here. Maybe I'll have a banana later after dinner. Dessert banana. I really want a banana now, what the heck? Return to monkey. Dude, this masking tape is yellow. Maybe it's subconsciously making me want a banana because of its yellow color. Big Banana is influencing everything, including the color of my masking tape. Why is this masking tape yellow anyway? It seems to be a popular color for masking tape. But my painter's masking tape is blue. Maybe? Maybe it is the influence of the banana corporations. They are trying to convince us to eat more bananas. And I have to resist this urge. I probably should have hand brushed this. I should have hand brushed this silver for the thrusters, probably. One reason I say that is because these thrusters are on the inside of the model. You won't really see them. But I guess probably really wanted the challenge of doing this masking, and also it's kind of relaxing just doing nothing but this right now. To some degree, I'm not too concerned about doing this perfectly. If there's a little bit of silver that leaks in some places, that's fine. It's just gonna be like, oh, the paint chipped off here. Battle damage. I'll make it look natural. It'll work. It's not a painting mistake. Because like I mentioned in an earlier stream, the goal isn't to make this look perfect, though. Every time I do a painting job, I want it to look perfect in the process, just like as a personal challenge. Okay, so earlier I mentioned that painter's tape isn't really good, but we're gonna use painter's tape. Okay, this is so big it doesn't fit in the camera, but yeah, this is painter's tape. Also, let me go turn on a light. I think I don't have enough backlight. Okay, does that help? No, doesn't help. Anyway. Maybe I should turn this lamp around a bit, like this. Here. glue lock, edge lock. Yeah. Okay, I actually can't keep this lamp here because otherwise I can't see my workspace, but I wonder if I should move this lamp down a little bit. Yeah, pretty good. Okay. Okay, so we're going to use the masking, the good old painter's masking tape. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this tape and stick it against something like my table and then pull it off a few times. That way it's less sticky, because I don't want it to be too sticky. Otherwise, like I said before, it can ruin paint jobs. So we're going to tear this in half. Okay, here we go. It's here to cover up the big areas. And then I'm going to use the 10mm tape to cover up some of the medium areas that are still left over. Like this part here. I don't need to 100% cover everything everywhere, because as long as I control the airbrush properly, I can make sure most of the paint ends up just around the area that I'm focusing. So part of me just wants, oh, that's a little bit too much. Part of me just wants to go and finish covering it up 100% just because there's so little left, but that's probably just a waste of tape and time. Okay. One piece left to go. It is a lot of tape. that's what masking often looks like. There's two ways of masking. Either you mask the whole thing and leave a little tiny space to paint, or you paint that little tiny space, mask it, and then paint everything left over. This is a case of the mask the little space and paint everything else. This is an even better example of that. But then here is an example of mask everything except the little space that you want to paint. Which strategy we use depends on how easy it is to mask. I went with the leave the little space here because this thing is too detailed, it has too much going on the surface, and that makes it hard for the paint or the masking tape to cover it up. But then for other things, I just decided, yeah, this can be covered, small enough. It's easy. Okay. Wait a second. Did I forget something? No, I didn't forget it. Okay. Last piece. Need the 1mm again. That might be too much. Start with this. Crap. I just pulled it off. There's static electricity. It's making it jump, making the tape jump to different surfaces. Oh, sorry. That was a really bad bump. Is it loud? Do you hear it when I bump, or is it just... Does it just cause the camera to shake and that's it? Because if it's a microphone, I could imagine it being loud. But as just a camera, it might not make it as loud. This doesn't go all the way. It's too short. Okay, need some 6mm tape now. Oh, I needed more 1mm before I did that. Oi. Masking tape. Why are you stuck like that? Hello, Beb. Okay, 10mm. Oh. I think one thing, okay, so I keep on bumping into the camera because when I turn my head, my headphones or maybe my hoodie catch the cable behind the camera. But I think that with experience, I can just be confident that I'm holding the part in the right place. And the reason I'm turning my head is to check my screen, check my monitor to see if the camera is capturing the part, if I'm putting the part in the right place on screen. Just need to be more confident. Have confidence. Okay, time for the big tape. I have about 30 minutes. I'm gonna speed run the final painting session. Okay, quick plan review. 3 colors, white, silver, and gold. I need to do the... I'll do gold, silver, and then white. Gold first because it's the fewest pieces. Silver next because doing 2 metallics back to back is probably the easiest transition. Less cleaning in order to make sure that the next paint works right, and then silver is closer to white than gold. That's why it's gold, silver, then white. That way each paint is next to another paint that is very similar to it, so cleaning doesn't need to be as perfect. Still needs a little bit more tape. extra tape. Just slap it somewhere. This tape is not going to... Okay, I will need to tweak that a little bit right before we actually do the painting to make sure that the contact is good. Okay, so the gold pieces are these 4. Okay, these 4 are the gold pieces, so it's only 4 that need gold. Silver is going to be just these 2, the wing pieces, and then everything else is white. White is just these 7 pieces, and then these pieces in the bottom left corner we can ignore. Oh, sorry about that. The camera's way close. Okay, time to switch modes. I have about 25 minutes to do this. Alright, I think I actually made it. I got all the painting I wanted to do done today. Now we just have to wait for everything to dry, and then we'll get onto doing the fun colors. So, if you were here for one of the first streams on this project, we decided on some more interesting colors, including blue, purple, pink, and yellow. Hopefully next time we will be painting those colors. That will also involve a bunch of masking, but it'll be an interesting process because I want to paint all 4 colors in one go. So I'll mask, paint, and then we'll wait a little bit for it to dry and then mask and paint again. And we'll do that in rapid succession and try to do all the colors in one go, while also doing some patterns with it. Yeah, so look forward to that. I think I'll try to stream that on Wednesday, which means tomorrow and the day after there will be no streams. So look forward to that on Wednesday. Again, thank you for stopping by and hanging out with me while I paint and work on my model kits. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I also decided that I would include my Twitter in the video description so it's easier for people to find. Please consider checking that out as well. Alright, and that is going to be it for today's stream. See ya!